See, I learned something from Suge Knight. I never met
Suge Knight.
No.
The actor.
I never met Suge Knight. Hold on, where are we at right now? What's this block?
This is 37th and 7th.
I'm on 37th and 7th at the Five Guys.
34th.
Oh, 34th. By the Lowe's.
Between 8th and 9th.
Yeah, 34th between 8th and 9th. All right.
Oh, and he knows Tootsie.
He told me.
Yeah.
All right, so look, I learned this lesson from Suge Knight while I was sitting on my bunk in Rikers Island, C-74, Mod 3 Upper, facing 3 years of life in prison for a drug charge. And I was reading the Source magazine, and Suge Knight had this great saying. He said, the average person looks to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. He said, but I'm different. He said, I kill 4 birds with 1 stone. He said, what I do with the stone, I break it in half. And I kill 2 birds with 1 half and 2 with the other.
Wow.
Point being, that's how I live my life. That's why I'm so successful in business, that I maximize every opportunity to its optimum. So instead of just recording this content for Cop Nation or for B-roll or for behind the scenes, I'm also going to put it on Periscope, so we have content on Periscope, which then I'm going to save my Periscope to my phone and upload it to YouTube later.
Yeah.
So now I have YouTube content, Periscope content, Cop Nation content, and you're about to give everybody a lesson right now. So we got 4 birds with 1 stone. All right, cool. So hold on, here we go. Lesson on Periscope. Here you go, Ken. You can record this. All right, so we did our little round table thing, the end out the Cop Nation footage, right? Where's Mark at? He should be out here. But anyway, all right, so we did a little Cop Nation thing, and everyone spoke about, police brutality, what this movie meant to them, Black Lives Matter, Cop Nation. And he gave a passionate speech from his perspective, trying to understand where does it all come from. And then King approached me and was like, hey, he heard my speech where I talked about it being systematic. He said, I like that, that's systematic stuff. And so what I said to him was, look up the 13th Amendment. I said, I'll give you some homework. I said, I'm not gonna explain anything to you, I'm not gonna preach to you. I said, just look up the 13th Amendment and see what you get. He said, all right, I want an aha moment. So, you looked it up, right?
Yeah.
What'd you get? This is the 13th Amendment of the American Constitution, right? What's it say?
All right, so in school we're taught that the 13th Amendment basically frees slaves, and that any type of slavery or involuntary servitude is illegal unless unless you committed a crime, virtually.
Right.
Now, when I was reading through it, it also took me to another part of it where it said that during the War of 1812, in the confusion of the War of 1812, it was illegally removed from the establishment because the records building burned down. So, and because of that burned down, and they knew that it was there, they replaced it with the slave amendment, which I couldn't get into because I couldn't find it in time on my phone. But it just made me think, in the confusion of that, and you want to salvage all of your amendments because that makes your Constitution, why conveniently would you leave out the 13th one? And this was back in the 1800s.
Right.
So my question to you was, what was your take on that? Because if that's the case, how do we know that it was completely salvaged now?
All right, great question. So here's the whole thing where this ties into this movie, Cop Nation, Black Lives Matter, which basically is highlighting or bringing global attention to the injustices in America, targeting black and brown people, right? That's the whole Black Lives Matter movement. And to our 13th Amendment, why I tell you look it up, was actually the first thing you said, is that my contention, my theory, my common sense says, when you look at why is it, and you ask the question, like, why cops just don't target black people, like, maybe it starts at home or in the community or wherever it starts. But that's not it. Cops have been, and our government has been, systemically targeting black people to arrest them from the year that slavery was abolished, right? Slavery was abolished in 1865, but in our 13th Amendment, which is what he said, but what we don't focus on in the 13th Amendment is that it said slavery is abolished in America and American territories unless you commit a crime. It didn't say in America we believe slavery is abolished permanently, indefinitely. There should never be slaves in America under any circumstance. It said slavery is abolished in America unless you commit a crime. So in 1865, the American government started the convict leasing system, where if you got arrested, they could then lease the convicted criminals back to businesses, plantations, to work.
Really?
So this is all facts. All you can Google it, Wikipedia, whatever you want to do. So when the 4 million Africans were freed from slavery, right? Freed, abolished, crimes. There was a code called the Black Codes or vagrancy tactics that happened, which made it illegal to be homeless. It was illegal not to have a job. So now if you were black and you were homeless, mind you, you're just now freed from slavery. But if you are homeless,
Yeah, you got nowhere to go.
you got nowhere to go. It's illegal.
Yeah.
So I can arrest you and I can lease you back to a plantation to work. If you walked on the wrong side of the tracks, or if you were without a job or a job a white person approves of, that was illegal. So we now can arrest you and lease you back to the plantations.
Okay.
So this is where we talk about systemic racism and systemic injustices. That's the system. It just didn't stop in 1865. It then went into the 1900s, right? Then it went into the 1970s and where they had COINTELPRO and the government was targeting civil rights groups. Then it went into mass incarceration, the war on drugs, stop and frisk, 3 strikes you're out, the RICO laws, where offenders who were caught with cocaine, which was a more drug that was popular in white communities or middle class communities, would get lesser crimes than those caught with crack, which was found in black communities, right?
Yeah, I think it was what, 200 grams equals 5 grams?
Yeah, all that crazy shit.
Yeah.
Or why black people typically get sentenced, right now it's 58 and a half months for non-violent crimes compared to white people who get convicted an average of 60 months for violent crimes. Bringing it back to the 13th Amendment. Black people, right, Black Lives Matter, black people, the African people, are brought here as chattel property to work. They didn't bring us here to be citizens and to be, right? The intention of having Africans in America was for their label as chattel property.
Right.
And so, when 1865, when Britain put pressure on America to abolish enslavement, it's like, shit, what do we do with the 4 million Africans that helped build the whole country? We literally built the White House for free. So they always wanted the black labor, right? And the poor people's labor. And so, when we got abolished in 1865, the way they kept the opportunity to keep our labor was to say, we're gonna make laws, and now businesses like Victoria's Secret, Starbucks, and other corporations pay politicians, they lobby politicians to make laws that target poor and black people and give them longer sentences so they go to jail to work like I did when I was locked up in upstate New York.
What did you do? Like, what was the benefit of your labor when you were in jail?
Well, I worked in upstate New York in Ulster County, cutting down trees for 8 hours a day for 30 cents a day.
Really?
So if you can get someone to cut down trees that's a $13 an hour job for 30 cents a day, it's a big benefit to the jails. Or if you get someone, you think about jails, people, what most of you don't know if you haven't been to prison, right? Most of you don't know if you haven't been to prison is that when you go to jail, even county jails, that the inmates take care of the whole prison. They mop the floors, they make the food, they groom the lawns, right? And those are all free jobs. So the prison system makes money off free labor. Private companies make money off free prison labor. And the American government utilizes this workforce as free labor. And it's only legal that it happens in voluntary servitude or the slavery because our 13th Amendment says so. It says slavery is only abolished unless you're convicted of a crime. So if we, as black Americans, you're an attorney, am I lying yet?
No, you're not.
Okay, I didn't think so. So we as black Americans, and as all Americans, as all Americans in this Black Lives Matter Cop Nation movie, the gist of what I'm doing a conference call tonight at 8 p.m. You guys won't know, but Periscope, you guys know. At 8 p.m. for YMC, I'm doing a conference call tonight for an organization I started called the Black Tea Party. And the purpose of the Black Tea Party, the initial purpose, is to address the 13th Amendment and simply say, no slavery, no exception in America. If we all stood up and said, no slavery, no exception, this is what happens. Here's the chain effect. If there's no slavery allowed in America with no exception, that means there's less incentive for politicians to create laws and lobby judges and prosecutors to give sentences to, which gives the fuel to the police to target black and brown people, because all the police do is just do their job. Their job is told to meet these quarters, we need to fill these jails up, we gotta do X, Y, Z. So they're just doing their job, they're trying to do it with a pure heart, but they have superiors. Superiors have superiors. And so the trickle-down effect, the domino effect is that if they knew they had to pay inmates minimum wage for the jobs that they worked in prison, because mind you, if you go to jail, your penalties are freedom being taken away.
Yes.
Your penalties shouldn't be slavery, free labor, or cheap labor.
Right.
So if we made it a stance and said no slavery, no exception in America, we are Americans, we had enough of slavery, no exception to slavery. That would just fuck the system up. That would give these cops less incentive to want to target a black or brown person, and these prosecutors less incentive to put us away for longer sentences, because you're now not getting free labor out of us. You got to pay us like we weigh.
Okay, well, there's another aspect to that also, because if you have a rule like that and you kill slavery under that type of thinking, then you have more incentive to do schools as opposed to incentive to do prisons.
To rehabilitate.
Okay, so let me ask you this. All right, if someone were to get arrested, they'd have to go through the system. What do you propose would be a better way for them to spend their days in prison? You said you for instance, cut down trees.
Right.
You could have, what would you do instead? Maybe, is there a class you could have taken, or what would replace that, right?
Right,
because
gotcha.
you were doing cheap labor, and which isn't fair.
I would have did the work, pay me a fair wage so I could save money and come home to money instead of having to come home and sell drugs. Or I could have sent money home to my family to take care of my family instead of, there's so much crime and gang and so much drugs and activity going on in the prisons because guys are trying to figure out ways to make money to send home to take care of their families. So if people were getting paid a fair wage while in jail, then they could do that. The other thing for rehabilitation, yes, trades would be good and effective.
Yes,
rehabilitation for our skills, like even real estate or other things you could do with felonies, right? Things that guys can do once you get a record, so you come home, you don't feel like I have no other options but to commit more crimes, go back to jail, and work for free again. And that's why there's been no major incentive to rehabilitate, because if we don't rehabilitate them, they'll come back and keep working for us for cheap and for free.
Oh, I see. But I mean, that just penalizes the community. When they get out of jail,
We're in a capitalistic society, though. They don't care about the community, they care about capitalism, money.
Which community are you talking about?
Don't you think the more contributing members of a society you have, the better off it becomes?
But it depends on what community you're talking about. It penalizes certain communities, but maybe not others.
This is true. But doesn't that affect others? If there's one bad apple, then that could have a ripple effect, right?
Well,
so if an urban community, primarily containing more black people, Hispanic people, isn't as well off, and there's more crime, doesn't that, in the macro picture, affect eventually the whiter communities, wealthier communities? Shouldn't there be incentive for?
I get your point, right? Great point. But you got to remember, we have, and that's why the government has something called redlining, where they do red lines on maps and create the ghettos. So it doesn't really affect the whiter communities and affluent communities as much, because the crimes are going on in Brownsville. They're going on in Brooklyn. They don't affect the white communities, so the white communities actually live in those communities. And then they regentrify and raise the prices and can push all the poor people out. So now it's new communities. So you're not, if you're living in downtown Manhattan or on Wall Street or Tribeca, you're not affected by what goes on in the Bronx or Harlem.
Brownsville,
And it's also a cost-benefit analysis. So if you do the cost-benefit analysis on a community-by-community basis, it may cost one community much more than another. And if I'm looking at it as the benefits of having people in these prisons, even though they come out, they don't come back where I am, and they go back into prison, the benefits may weigh much higher than the cost. At least perceptive, as I perceive it.
And then you have many of the wealthy who own stock, and even Michael Jordan owns stock in prisons. Or in companies that participate in prisons.
I know it's a big issue, which I don't like how there's incentive, money-wise, for people to go to prison.
The biggest incentive is the free labor. That's the incentive, like no matter if it's private prison, city prison, or federal prison, It's not, everyone likes to focus on the private prisons because it sounds sexy or top topic to say these companies use prison labor. Forget the companies. The government itself uses prison labor just to run government institutions. right? The county jails, you go to 1 Center or 100 Center Street or whatever downtown. That's all cleaned and run and maintained by prisoners for free. And so that's the incentive. So our whole prison, judicial, criminal justice system is run by an incentive to keep cheap and free labor because they're allowed to because of our 13th Amendment. And that's why a movie like Cop Nation, Black Lives Matter, and these things are so important. But we have to understand the root of all. If we're not educated on the why, the root of it, we're all just screaming Black Lives Matter for the hell of it. But we don't even understand why and where Black lives didn't matter and where it started from. And it started from not just the enslavement, but as us coming into America as citizens, they kept a clause there that said you can be enslaved if you commit a crime. And guess who controls all the laws? So we're gonna make it hard for you not to commit crimes. We're gonna make tough laws on you, and we're not gonna help repair you like we help repair the Japanese Americans with restitution or reparation, or the Native American reparation, or like the German Jews who America's given millions and billions of dollars to, even millions last year alone. Jewish Holocaust survivors are still getting money. But America never intentionally repaired black people. So if you have a traumatized, unrepaired people who are now in poor areas that you redlined and pushed into, they're gonna commit more crimes. They have trauma, they have issues, and they have poverty.
So how can people should build skills, right? Be educated. Wouldn't you say that would raise the value of the communities?
Yes, I think it's twofold. It's economic and social repair.
Okay.
Right? So on the economic repair side, which is why I created my own school, J. Morrison Academy. I created my own school, own curriculum institution to teach us wealth building and real estate, right? Because if you don't come from money, right, and you don't come from real estate or business ownership, where the hell would you learn it or believe it's an option? You don't learn real estate in school. You don't learn home ownership in high school.
No, they don't. They don't teach enough about money in schools.
Right. You know what hurts the most? Those who don't come from money. Those who come from money don't got to learn financial literacy in school because you learn financial literacy at home.
You learn it at the dinner table.
Right. Those who don't come from money and grew up on welfare like myself and on food stamps and on WIC and free lunch, we ain't getting nowhere. All we got to do is rub 2 quarters together and try to get 50 cents. So I'm saying that education is very important because if you don't know how to function in an economic society, you're not going to do well in economics, right? Right. So that's one. And then social repair is very important. So I can teach you how to get money in a trade, but if socially you're still traumatized, your mom is traumatized, your mom was beat because her mom was beat, and her mom was beat, and she was beat by a slave master, and now you're beat or you're aggressive, or it all comes out. Even as simple as something I do for my community, right? I don't call black men or black women brother or sister or nigga or bitch or any of that. I say king and queen. I intentionally say that, not to exclude you as you're not important, but I simply say that because I know the trauma that my people have been through and the way we've degraded ourselves and been degraded in media, and that we need intentional stimulation, intentional elevation.
Confidence building.
That's all. Self-esteem building.
It's so important.
So if I call him king all day, he calls me king all day, he calls him king all day, and we're texting back, well, look, king, good morning, king. He say, hey, queen, hey, queen, hey, queen. You gonna start feeling better. You gonna start feeling
in your mind. You walk around, you visualize.
You're not feeling like a nigga or a bitch.
No, definitely ain't.
And that's so there's things we can do within ourselves as black people to help. Since we haven't been repaired, nobody sprinkled dust on us and repaired us, we have to repair ourselves. And so it starts with social development and economic development.
Now let me ask you this then. Seeing how the government may benefit from, say, the prison industrial complex, we can do things to educate ourselves, to build ourselves up individually, because it does start individually, so you can go out and teach a community. But then what do you do, or what do you propose we could do to change an entire generations of a government that felt that this had to be the way for us to thrive in a capitalistic society? Because there's a reason why we lead the world, I guess, if you want to say monetarily. But that the way we get that money may not be the most moral. What's moral about capitalism? So there may be people, business people, who may feel like, well, that's not how we do business, so this doesn't concern me. But the lack of education of how deep it goes, society's been so desensitized to things that we feel like it doesn't affect us. It could be a 50-year-old white guy at the top of a penthouse, or it could be a regular, everyday, hardworking guy who's just working for the MTA. neither of them have the education to figure out why it really does affect me, even if it doesn't directly affect me. So it's like me and him were talking a little earlier about the generational thing. So when you have generations of practice in one thing, how do you change that? Or do you not change it currently, or do you just do what you can? So your kids and their kids and their kids and following can be that change. Because we're never going to see this change in our lifetime.
I disagree.
You don't think so?
I disagree. Never say never.
You're right.
Never say. Everyone told me as a 3-time felon with the 2.5 years in prison, I would never get a real estate license.
Right.
That I would never do a whole bunch of shit that I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
You can never say never, especially in the age of the information age and technology and social media. We could get these messages out way faster like this than they ever. Mind you, we thought we would never get out of slavery. And we pulled that off with no social media.
Yeah.
So things can be changed if we're intentional about it, purposeful about it, and we're self-determined enough. So to me,
Do you think we're willing to sacrifice as a society, as a complete society, sacrifice enough to make that happen? Because it's gonna take a lot of sacrificing of, what grandma taught me from when I was a kid, meaning just in general, to know that maybe grandma was wrong. Maybe mom and dad were wrong. You don't necessarily want to be that guy to tell your family, no, the way you think is wrong. So I do believe, now that you say that it can happen, but it's just about the sacrifice and the self-sacrifice to make sure that these social changes happen. So none of our kids and our grandkids have to worry about what we've been worrying about for the last 600 years.
Go ahead. Yeah, I want to step in. Great comments. Real quick as we wrap up. David, what's your nationality?
European American.
European American.
Yeah.
I want to ask this fundamental question. First of all, I've seen you around quite a bit.
Right.
And you love all people. I've just noticed that about you.
Right.
Hearing this conversation as a European American, did anything spark anything different in your perception? That's the question I wanted to ask. Because there are two fundamental perceptions in America.
Mm-hmm.
There's a minority perspective,
Right.
and how minority and people of color see the world.
Right.
It's very different
Yeah.
from European Americans.
It is,
and the
yeah.
perspective.
My ancestors, my father was Italian, German, my mother's Irish, German. The passion.
Okay.
So I can just feel it from Jay,
Mhm.
and it's a mindset, is what it is, and he's trying to convey to his culture, his peers, that we have to change our mindset. That's kind of been embedded in you guys for years, hundreds of years, and only when you do that are things going to change. And I'd say I have many different races of friends: Asians, Hispanics, Black friends, and so I've heard these conversations before, but I think it's always great to talk about them. And what I wanted to ask Jay is, how can other communities continue to help take action like you're taking action? Ultimately, you and the Black community can't do it by yourself.
Right.
We have to, as a people, everybody has to make some type of change to raise up just all communities, so everybody's at least on an equal playing field, in
Right.
theory. So how would you say other communities can go about doing that and influencing change?
Yeah, great question. So I would say 2 big points. One is for our European American brothers and sisters to be open-minded to the
Right.
plight and the experience of Black people.
Definitely.
Right? Being open-minded about that and educating yourselves. Like I'm sure you didn't know that there was that clause in the 13th Amendment. Did you know that?
I didn't.
Right? So understanding that there is some systemic injustices
Right.
that are deeply rooted. And
There is. I had no idea, and that's huge. That little clause in the 13th Amendment. That's huge.
major.
And because that goes back just so far, and it's deep. It's so deeply rooted. There's not much you can.
Right. So,
I mean, it
so
affects
I would
everything.
say, from a European American perspective,
Yeah.
is just for everyone to open their hearts up and have empathy.
Right.
The same you would as if it were Jewish people that went through it, or Polish people, or German, or Italian people that went through the same things that we went through.
Right.
People, and I believe this, it's an opinion, but I believe it, people would empathize more with the Black plight if we weren't Black. The whole world is more desensitized to Black people. You're so used to seeing it, but if we were white and we were getting shot down like that,
Right.
or if we were white and they were getting whips in our backs and raping our women and hanging us from trees and burning us alive, and blacks were looking around laughing at it, we'd all look at it different when it's.
We definitely would.
We definitely would, right? Yeah. Thank you for commenting that. So I want to say this. So I would say that from a European perspective, is have empathy, have love, and just see our situation, and then secondly, have the ability to step out the way, because as black people, we always want to lean on someone else to help repair us. And it's a time that, it's kind of like this. We grew up in a foster home, right? See, all of us grew up in a foster home. And our foster parents were abusive to us. Right? And some of us left out and did better than others, but we all had trauma from this abuse. And now the other parts of the world wants to hug on us, but as foster kids who went through this together, sometimes we need to hug ourselves and love ourselves and say, we need to pick ourselves up and get us about the situation. So when we say a Black Lives Matter, sometimes we don't need an All Lives Matter.
So Jay,
that's already implied.
We're running low on cards, so I'm gonna hop in here real quick. We got a French American, so you might want to ask him some questions.
I'm French. I'm not American. Okay. I'm from Paris. Nice meeting you.
Yes, you too, Queen.
So I was listening to your point of view, and I really like the diversity. I like everything you brought. As a French Parisian, I was born in Africa and I grew up in Paris, and now I live in New York. I would like to say that I live here since 4 years, and we are very disappointed as a black French when we see on TV, because you are our hopes as American. In French TV, there is no representation of no black people on TV, on the TV shows, on anything. There's no black on TV. But the only black on TV that we see are in the Americans movie. So when we come here, we all, oh my God, this is amazing. But when we see what's happening and all the racism and all the things that you guys been talking about, we are extremely disappointed, because we see America, I'm talking as a black French, we see it as a land of hope. You see what I'm saying? Because when I grew up, I'm 28, I grew up in Paris. On TV, there were no black people at all. It's only in 2012 that the first black actors had a nomination. 2012, and he was playing a maid. I know I'm gonna get a lot of black clash saying that, but it's okay. I know what I'm talking about. So we always see you guys with a lot of hope, and we follow your lead. So we just a little bit, what's going on in America?
We're working on it. But thank you for that perspective. And I didn't know that France or Paris was that biased within itself.
Well, they definitely look at America with. I have a French buddy. He's black. He loves it. This is why he wants to do it. We have such a voice to the rest of the world. And I think
we're that beacon of hope.
We definitely are.
And that's why I think if America stood up and said no slavery, no exception.
Yes.
F that private prison system. If someone goes to jail, they lose their freedom.
Right.
I don't care if it's for a year or 100 years, they lose their freedom. But they should not be made slaves because they committed a crime. If we as Americans said no slavery, no exception, and you can sign a petition at blackteaparty.org to support that. If we all stood up as black, white, Asian, whatever the hell we are, and said no slavery, no exception, that would set a tone and be a massive blow towards mass incarceration and these police brutality and all these injustices.
Well, mass incarceration